We got reports that it was a plane that struck the World Trade Center. That may be the case, but this whole area is being shut down. There's pieces of debris and other matter all over the area.
Mike, this is a big one, Mike. We heard it's a plane crash, but we don't know yet.
Well, my best bet for you is to try and get out of there as soon as you can, okay? Just get out of there.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Rabinowitz, and it's my honor to host this film, Then and Now, 9/11 to 2011, New York City Transit Remembers. There is an untold story about the thousands of transit employees who were some of the first responders of that horrific day, 9/11. Standing side by side with NYPD, FDNY, EMS, and Port Authority Police were the men and women of the New York City Transit. This documentary will highlight their roles as first responders and as unsung heroes, and the recovery and rebuilding of subway lines under Ground Zero. But before we can talk about the now, we must first take a look back then.
Actually running from the stage deli when the second tower collapsed. When that second building collapsed, we just saw a puff of smoke outside, and we knew that we had to get away from the location because we were very close.
They were surprised that the situation I described to them, that picture proved to them. I was in a really bad situation. I mean, they cried, and so they knew, knowing me, that I would be somewhere around, because that's the way I am. I'm gonna react and try to help the people of New York.
I could see the station was getting smoke, and started entering the station. I started hitting the horn. Whenever we bypassed the station, we first hit the horn, I don't know, cloths, rags, anything they really had, and waving frantically. These people were scared, and these people were really scared. Command by then had gotten back to me, authorizing me to stop and pick them up. But that was already being done. There's just no way to leave them. You can't just leave them like that.
The desire to leave the job was incredible. I just want to grab my stuff and go look for her. But I also had a responsibility. Now, what I didn't realize, and I've never really I don't think I've gotten to say, and what I didn't allow for, was while I was doing what I had to do to get people home and keep people safe, my coworkers were doing the same thing, and they got my wife home for me when I couldn't. And there's no way I could say thank you for that.
What the nation does not know is not one employee, passenger, train, or bus was lost on that day due to the fast-thinking and caring employees of New York City Transit.
And we see the conductor, the motorman coming down, telling everybody to please get back on the train. We have to get out of here. He closed the doors. We went to the next stop, City Hall, and he comes out and makes an announcement that a plane had hit the Trade Center.
With the smoke coming down, I figured something was going on upstairs. And we got everybody on the train, closed down, and we proceeded.
We realized that the people that were stuck in the tunnel, approximately 300 cars, the people started to walk out of the tunnel, abandoning their vehicles in the tunnel, locking their keys in the vehicles. And people in Manhattan had no egress into Brooklyn, so they were running towards the tunnel as shelter. So several hundred, maybe thousands of people had walked through the tunnel at the time that the buildings had collapsed.
While people walked through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel to daylight, back in Manhattan, the last trains were leaving with survivors, and the Department of Buses kept rolling, moving people out of harm's way.
We were standing here the initial impact, and I was told there was a hole in the building. So we knew immediately that they were going to need us downtown because we know what happened with the World Trade Center the last time. And while we were sitting here, we watched the next impact and we watched the buildings fall down. So we think on our feet around here. It took about 10 seconds to know that they needed us. I realized that we were actually involved in the rescue. We were involved in moving people and moving the doctors and the nurses and the police department and the fire department. And the humanity came out, and people in the neighborhood realized that these folks were actually here helping, and maybe they could help us, and they did. They came through and they fed us and they took care of us and they provided us with drink and they provided us with clothing if we needed it.
I didn't see anybody say, I can't drive the bus because I can't see out the front. They said, no, I got to get the job done. And people would be banging on the side and they'd start the bus and the guy would get it because you couldn't see them. And it was kind of a gratifying to see that all the training that we did actually came to fruition.
I could see headlights. I didn't know what it was, and I could hear somebody's voice. I thought they were saying to get on the bus, but they were saying later on, I found out, was follow my voice. I literally handed past the entire bus. The gentleman on the bus came out to get us in the midst of all this black smoke.
After the people started banging on the bus all around the sides, I mean, you couldn't see outside the bus. I just opened the door and I said, follow my voice. And about 11 people started coming on the bus. They were choking, crying. And I think I just did what any other human being would have done. I mean, you hear people banging on the outside of the door. They actually gave me a purpose.
I don't know how to thank you.
Okay.
I don't know how to thank you for that thing.
And this particular gentleman and the security person were helping two ladies. They passed the lady to me. I helped her on the bus. There was another lady in a building saying, wait for me, help me. We went and got her, put her on the bus. By this time, I guess we got about 25 people on the bus. But people were so excited to the point it was being yelled out, leave them out there, let's get out of here, we're gonna die. I said, what I have to do is follow instruction. My instruction is to get you out of this area to a safe location.
And there was a woman with a little boy, and I couldn't leave him, so I just stayed, And then people started coming to me, and I wound up with, I don't know, a pretty large group of people, somewhere like 50 to 75 people. And I thought that the subway was on fire, so I figured smoke rises, let's go down. And we went down to the J platform at Fulton Street. I went back down and I got the people, and I said, brought them out to the street. And as we were going past the token booth, there was a guy having a heart attack, or appeared to have a heart attack, on the ground. So I grabbed him, and somebody else grabbed him, and he didn't touch the stairs going up. We went up the stairs, and right in the middle of the intersection was an ambulance. So we just opened the back door and pushed him in. There must have been about 10 people in there already, and then the ambulance pulled out.
We were walking down through the Lex Line tunnel with the police escort, and we heard a rumbling, a low rumbling at first, and it just got louder. When we got out onto the street, we found that number 7 World Trade Center had collapsed. It was burning all day, and around 7 p.m. while we were in the tunnel, it just decided to fall down.
The thing that stuck with me the most was when the buildings came down, how dark it became from the smoke and ash and everything. The darkness was amazing. I've never seen darkness like that.
You see the remains of desktops with memos or family photographs or other memorabilia, a shoe, a handbag. And at that moment, you realize that the dust that you're walking through are human remains. And for that 1 second, I was in the graveyard in St. Paul's, I remember this. I sat down on one of the gravestones because I felt I was gonna lose it. And I didn't want to lose it because I had a job I had to do.
Oh my God is the first thing that goes through your mind. But then there was a different emotion, a different thought that came. I mean, this is my country. This is my city. This is my friends, my family. And that emotion took over, and every moment was filled with that thought.
As a stunned city, country, and world looked on, transit did what it does best, and in a way no one ever could have imagined. Transit employees rushed down to Ground Zero to help their city in crisis. They removed steel and earth by trucks and even by hand.
I was down at Ground Zero, down a hole, alongside a fireman, clearing debris, touching metal that was red hot and just passing it back and forth. I mean, none of us knew the word tired. A lot of guys were beat, but we kept going because we're all Americans, we're TA workers, and we're working side by side with every agency, every other city agency that's our brother and sister in this land, in this beautiful city of New York City.
I'm on the pile, and then I was on the bucket line where they were moving body parts. And it was very devastating looking at, a leg passing you, a finger here, a head there, another piece of a body there. It was very devastating.
It was heartbreaking. The worst thing for me was watching all the doctors, the EMS people waiting on the side, waiting for us to find people alive. They had hundreds of ambulances. You had hundreds of doctors, nurses, people there, medical people, and they had nothing to do. There was no survivors. That's what really got to me, because they were there, waiting for us to uncover. We were digging out with our hands, trying to remove debris, and there was no survivors.
Track workers, structure maintainers, signal maintainers all over the city. When their tours ended on a midnight tour, they all flocked down here. Nobody told them to come. They were in the pile along with everybody else. There were no buckets there when I first got there. There were no buckets at all. Everybody was going through the pile by hand.
The first order of business was to clear a path so that emergency personnel could get onto the pile to search for survivors. The two main groups that were involved in clearing that path were sanitation, heavy equipment crews, but the bulk were transit workers with payloaders, backhoes, earth movers, and such, clearing paths for the emergency personnel to get on the pile.
Well, we had several missions. First was the burning the steel and removing the debris with our trucks. We had the bulldozers, we had heavy equipment. There were over 350 trucks, and all the workers were there, and it just really looked good and made me feel proud to be a transit worker.
I see, Hoffman with his boys removing track. Now, not track, steel beams. Now remember, they needed steel beams removed. Okay, so we have the best and most numerous people who are trained in a short time to remove rails if there's a problem. And these were the perfect crew to take the beams out, to cut the beams so that the rescue people and the medical people could get the victims.
It took us forever to get to the Long Island Expressway, and when we did, it was empty. You couldn't get on it unless you had clearance. We had clearance. We were transit, and we drove the entire length by ourselves, with the smoke rising in the distance, and listening to the news reports on the radio as we drove in together. We could not find the power to speak.
It was like dusty, smoke, you couldn't breathe. You looked around, you really didn't find nothing. We were like as a team, like one group was picking into this, one group was picking into the pots, one group was digging in a certain area. We were looking underneath and all over the place, and we found a couple of parts, but not much.
We were working with the firemen from basically Rescue 5, whoever was left, and a couple of the other Brooklyn houses, and we were going through the demolition pile, and we had rakes. and we found shoes. And we looked inside the shoe, and there was body parts. And we had to turn them in. But it was like you're holding somebody in your hand. And it was like, this is it. This is all that's left.
Hundreds of transit vehicles were servicing Ground Zero, and thousands of transit workers rolling up their sleeves to give aid. And whether they were on the pile or removing debris, they all moved as one unit.
We were the first on the scene to make a path and remove debris so emergency vehicles can get in. And New York City Transit was right on the ball. They were right there. My one daughter had written me this, the little sign that I kept. And it says, I like what you're doing, Dad, but we want you to come home. So I took this and I carried it with me. And the whole time I was down there, and I kept it in the window of the machine I was using.
At any given time, we had several hundred people here for the first 2 weeks, transit workers. In total, almost 2,500 transit employees were participated in the recovery and rescue effort.
Well, we were involved in removing a MetroCard vending machines and some turnstiles from a station that was actually buried under some of the rubble. And one thing that sticks in my mind is the passenger information board inside the token booth. It had 9/11, no trains running, and I pretty much will always remember that.
New Yorkers did not have to wait long to get the trains rolling again through Lower Manhattan. People still had to get to work, and mass transit was and still is the lifelines of the city.
As we sat there with the service shut down, we wondered, will the crews still be there when we restart? They had every reason to be afraid about their family and friends as we did. But amazingly, when the decision was made to restart the service, all the crews were still there, and the dispatchers were still there, and the trains moved.
At 10:20 a.m., service ended throughout the 5 boroughs. 3 hours later, one subway line was restored every 10 minutes. By 2:30 p.m., 2/3 of the subway system was restored, and 72 hours later, trains were stopping in Lower Manhattan.
In the command center overnight that night, there was a fear that the subways would be the next part of New York attacked. But we also realized we had to provide service for the people of New York. So we were focused mainly on getting the service back, depending upon what parts of the subway reopened.
During the first month, we changed service over 10 times, and that meant that we had to redo the subway map over 10 times during that month. And every time we changed the service, the marketing department created a new subway map, which had to be printed, thousands of copies, for people to stand in the subway stations, handing them out to customers so that they knew what service was running on that particular day. The map became like a daily newspaper. If life at Ground Zero couldn't go back to normal, at least the subway could make steps towards normal.
As debris was being removed from Ground Zero, below ground the flooded tunnel was drained, and plans were in place to rebuild the 1 and 9 lines to bring life back to Lower Manhattan.
We took those drawings from 100 years ago, and we just duplicated them. We made new drawings because 100 years ago, the codes, the building codes were different, and the steel sizes were different. So we adapted that to the new steel sizes and new codes, and just made new drawings just to duplicate exactly what was there before.
It was a very depressing, negative time for everybody who worked above ground. Below ground, we're working to restore service as soon as we could. So we went into an engineering mode, and we were doing, for us, it was something positive, and there was a lot of momentum.
The total reconstruction of the subway box is within the Trade Center site about 1,400 feet, but there's additional work that continues on past the structural work, which track work and signals and so forth, and that goes on for close to a mile down to the lower tip of Manhattan.
And transit did keep going, and within 9 months, the subway line under the World Trade Center was up and running, bringing people back to Lower Manhattan.
We're laying track. I'm standing on loose track right here. It's being laid. It's all sorts of activities. Signals are being placed behind us. Normally that would go in sequence, but we have all the work going on at the same time so that the work can be done as quick as humanly possible.
Within a few months, the blood, sweat, and tears of the workers paid off as the last steel beam was installed. And a few weeks after, during one of the hottest summers on record, the last track was laid. In record-breaking time, on August 8, 2002, the last rail was installed for the 1 and 9 trains.
And this is something historical. I don't think even back then in 1900, when they built the subway, they didn't build the subway in 4 months. And we are so proud of building it in 4 months here.
I do think there may be some tears and some people that have emotions as they run through that site. We recognize that. We ourselves have those same emotions. It's very, very hard to do the first several times. And for that, I think we're going to have a little patience and let them understand. But no, there's nothing to fear. This system is back. It's stronger and safer than ever.
September 15th, 2002, 1 year and 4 days after the 9/11 terrorist attack, New York City Transit reopened the 1 and 9 subway line from Chambers Street to South Ferry. In a Herculean feat of engineering and construction, train service was restored 1 year ahead of projected estimates and at only 2/3 the estimated cost. Heralding the return to normal service, Governor Bertocchi rode the #1 train, praising New York City Transit and the transit workers for breathing life back into Lower Manhattan.
What would you say to all the transit workers who have put this thing back together?
Transit workers have done a great job. We've had the construction workers, the transit workers, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if anybody had seen that destruction on September 12th a year ago and thought that today we'd be riding the 1 train all the way down to the tip of Lower Manhattan, they would have thought we were dreaming. But New Yorkers always dream. And when we work together and stand together, our dreams come true. And this is an example of that.
Last year, 1,400 feet of subway tunnel between Liberty and Barclay Streets was filled with debris from the Twin Towers. Beams from the 80th floor pierced the street and subway box. As a result of water main breaks, the 1 and 9 tunnel sustained major flooding. However, the MTA and New York City Transit were determined to get the trains and the city moving again.
This was an incredible task, and a year ago, if people had said you'd be taking the 1 train to South Ferry, they would have thought we were dreamers. But people work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and this is the result. And as you hear the conductor announce the 1 train to South Ferry, you haven't heard that sound in a year, and we're just very proud that people in New York are hearing it today.
Once the train completed its historic run to the South Ferry station, all that was left was to officially reopen the rebuilt portion of the subway, benefiting 70,000 riders.
And New Yorkers had nothing to fear, and life went on. Now, 10 years later, for many, the memories are still fresh, and that day is forever embedded in their consciousness. And for our city, the loss can be found in the generations who will never see the top of the world.
We are standing 1,377 feet above Manhattan on the world's highest man-made observation deck. Right now we're overlooking Brooklyn, but you get to see Midtown Manhattan, the Statue of Liberty, Queens, everything from here. Bronx on a nice clear day with just the naked eye, you can see as far as Coney Island, probably about 25 miles, 30 miles. With the binoculars, 80.
How about the unique view here about the feeling of Manhattan Island?
You know, it's an interesting thing with views. First of all, man has always been fascinated by heights, whether it's climbing to the top of Mount Fuji or looking at the world from, you know, the bird's eye view, as we say. There are some obvious things. We were downstairs a few minutes ago and there was a gentleman speaking in Japanese, and there was very little that I understood except that he pointed down and said to his mother, "Matchbox cars," which gives you a feeling of, I guess, omnipotence when you're up here and everything's so small, but also at the same time insignificance because you have this vast city in front of you.
Winston, you're a photographer?
Yeah, I work for Transit News.
Okay, can you tell us what you saw, Winston?
Yeah, I'm sitting in the car, and I heard this plane overhead, and then all of a sudden I thought it sounded kind of louder. Then I looked up, and all of a sudden it smashed right dead into the center of the World Trade Center. Big flash of flame, Fire coming out from all over. Then all the bricks is a huge hole right now. It almost looks like the plane probably went through. I'm not sure.
Winston, can you see, are you on the north side there where the plane made contact?
Yes, I am.
Now, when you say a huge hole, one of our earlier witnesses, Libby Clark, said not much of the plane came down off the building. Much of it went
totally
right
into the building.
It's in the building, from what you can see.
Right.
Now, can
Yeah.
you see if there's a lot of debris downstairs, Winston?
No, because it looked like it inverted. With the impact, everything went inside the building.
Inside.
The only thing that came out was a little bit of the outside awning. But I'd say the hole is, let me just get a better look right now.
Okay, go ahead. We'll wait.
I'd say the hole takes about, looks like 6, 7 floors were taken out. And there's more explosions right now. Hold on, people are running.
Winston, hold on just a moment. We've got an explosion inside.
The building's exploding right now. You got people running up the street.
On 9/11, I had these binoculars, and once the plane hit the building, I was able to look inside the cavern that it left. So I saw a desk on fire, and I saw computers on fire. And then when I looked a little further up, I could see people in the windows, waving for help. But I also saw people breaking the windows to get air. As soon as they broke the windows, a gush of smoke would come out. And then the people behind them would push those in front of them out the windows because they're trying to get oxygen also. So this is a part of the story that's never been told because I had binoculars, I could see all this going on. And as a journalist, I saw this as a breaking news event and I'm on the scene. But as a civilian, I saw it as a great American tragedy.
It was so sad to see them so frantically trying to dig through a pile that was so huge. They were on top of it, and I don't think they realized how big it was. It looks, to me at the time, it looked so futile. I was saying to myself, everybody down there has just got to be dead.
Then I came across what was basically like a piece of giant paper onion skin, for lack of a better word. It was like purplish blackish. And I found out through an EMS worker that what I was holding was a body that was been compressed, the body tissues and that. And it was like, it's like, wow, this used to be a living soul.
Having seen the torso, I was so tired and so worn out. But when they said, we need a chaplain, I went. And all I could think of was, in my flesh I will see God.
When you have something that dramatic, if you get back into your work, the sooner you get back into your work, the sooner it's better for you. Some of the guys who stayed home after the incident, some of them never came back to work because they kept reliving that day.
For many, the mental stress lingers on, but for some, serious health issues have arisen. During the first few days and even weeks after, the volunteers were told the air quality was good at Ground Zero. But now, years later, many have gotten sick from being on the pile from so many days.
We have transit workers that are in an appalling state of health right now, folks whose lives have been ruined from spending a few weeks on that pile, fixing machinery and that type of stuff, operating buses. Lives will never be the same. Lives are wrecked over 9/11.
There's some lingering effects. And it wasn't until about 5 years after it was over that somebody actually explained to me the reason why I was having pulmonary problems was because I had been exposed. And I'm not a smoker or any of that stuff, but thank God I'm on, thank God it hasn't disabled me, and I hope it never does.
My brother was down there the day, that it happened on 9/11. He almost got caught when the South Tower collapsed. Okay, he's very sick now. He has like several different types of cancer. He was able to get off on disability, but he's like the living dead, It's like just a matter of time, before he's gone,
For years, transit employees were the unsung heroes of those horrific days. Even to this day, the public does not know the sacrifice that the transit employees made for the people and the city they love.
10 years later, I can really appreciate the resiliency of this nation, city of New York, and especially our employees, who are making every effort to bring everything back to New York City in its glory, that we will not allow this kind of behavior to deter our normal life and what America stands for.
I've been proud to be at the MTA from the day that I walked back in the door. But there's nothing that makes me prouder than hearing the stories, sharing the remembrances of the way this organization responded.
But what really paid off were the actions of the employees, because you can only do so much in terms of writing something into a procedure. The rest's got to come from the heart, it's got to come from the gut, it's got to come from the employee responding in the proper way. And that's invariably a trait most New York City Transit employees have, and it was certainly evident not only on 9/11, but all the days that followed 9/11.
We were a part of a success story. We participated in a mass evacuation of Lower Manhattan, a successful mass evacuation of Lower Manhattan to stem the tide of death and injury. And I'm very proud of that.
Every time you went into the subway, which everybody goes into the subway, every time you look at the map, you'd see that dash line. When we were able to make that a solid line again, that was powerful for all New York. That's what we did for New York, was we made that a solid line again. It was a sense of normalcy. That was, I think, the biggest thing we could do to restore normalcy in New York.
The response, the selflessness, the willingness to put yourself at risk and to work all out, both in the rescue and the recovery effort, is a story of working people being everyday heroes.
You know, it hurts when you hear people put down people in transit and the politicians and the public, but they don't realize what we go through. And it hurts sometimes when you just hear about, I mean, as much honor that they deserve, the police and emergency responders and the firemen, you never hear about the transit workers, you know, who were here helping people. And I just, you know, that kind of hurts. But then again, that's what transit is always about. They always do their work and they go about their business.
It still hurts because a lot of those people that died in the towers were our customers. People that I may have seen day in and day out, don't know each other, but you have a lot of regular passengers. They catch the same train every day. They go home on the same train every day. And like at the locations in the Pentagon, in that field in Pennsylvania, I think it was Flight 93. These are people that were just going about their business, just going to work, and never made it home.
On this 10-year anniversary, people all over the country are remembering the events of that day. But for New Yorkers and transit personnel, the healing process had begun. But the attacks and carnage will be part of the city's darkest history forever. You can rebuild buildings, but the lives that were lost and the lives still being lost will linger on for years to come. It is up to each of us to tell our stories to the next generation, to let them know bad things will happen. But during those horrific times, heroes will be born and sacrifices will be made so that we all can one day live in peace. I'm Michael Rabinowitz, and thanks for watching and riding New York City Transit.